In terms of proxy measurement, which is built into every business plan and seems very hard to get away from, even though it's really just a proxy, do you see any changes? You see any breakthroughs getting away from proxy?
Yeah, so the interesting thing about the way media has been measured is that it's always been very intangible. You can't, unless you know exactly when your commercial is going to air, you can't see it, and you can't see how many people have actually seen it. And of the people who theoretically have seen it, you can't see if they were actually watching with their eyeballs. So what is happening is, on the flip side, digital doesn't have a lot of proxies because you can actually know that a finger clicked on a mouse at some point along the way. So I think proxy measures are significantly under fire. I think there's got to be a match of the proxy to the census level data because both of them are important. I think the changes that are going to have to occur for that to happen is broad access to set-top box data, if the cable companies are willing to give that up, or connected TV data, which is actually in some cases better because it represents all kinds of viewing, and access to over-the-top data from Hulu or Netflix or Apple TV. So recognizing that there are a lot of data sources now, that's actually good for getting away from a proxy measure because it's saying that as people watch TV in different ways, those data sources are only going to find value if there's a way to integrate them. And this is an opportunity for Nielsen and Rentrak and Comscore to figure that out as the powerhouses in media measurement. But they've got to, and I think they are thinking about this much more broadly than looking at it as an example of, well, this audience must represent that audience, but looking at it as this individual actually is an individual, and we're turning that into research that people can buy on.
You mentioned Comscore, Nielsen, and Rentrak. Where does Simulmedia play in this field?
So there are companies that are in the measurement business for the purpose of selling research, and there are people who are in the best way to put this is they're using the measurement as a way to sell media. And the most obvious examples of those companies are Google and Facebook, who don't actually sell data, they use the data to deliver media. Simulmedia is much more in that camp of we are building a very rich repository of data and analysis and data science that helps, and we have a large repository of inventory like Google and Facebook do. And the goal is to bring those two together to use the measurement as a means to the media end or the ROI end of buying that media, as opposed to being a research company in itself. So Nielsen is a partner of ours, and we've done some research for them in terms of how they improve their product. But ultimately, we're in the business of selling media, just like our very, very large, well-known friends. And it's important to distinguish that because while we do have a lot of insight into what people are doing, the end goal for a business is not just to buy insight, but to buy the results. And we're very focused on that business outcome.
Can you tell me the types of data that Simulmedia uses and how you bring it all together?
Sure. So the way Simulmedia thinks about our data is there's an audience platform that we need to build, and that audience platform comes from what are they watching at a set-top box level, and what are their behaviors beyond watching TV, say from MRI or from Nielsen Buyer Insights, and bringing those data sets together to be able to understand where the next campaign should run across all inventory providers. And we have 86 different networks that we work with today, cable networks. So those data sets are the information that informs our placement of the advertising. And then we have data sets that can confirm at the impression level which household that we sent an impression to actually resulted in a transaction. And we use third-party data sets from the credit card companies. We also use first-party data sets in some cases from the client themselves to make that connection between where we delivered an impression and what the outcome was of that impression being delivered.
Do you deal with segmentations, and if so, how?
We have access to a lot of different data sources of segmentation, but we let the client tell us what they think their target is. Very often the agency has determined a target for the client, and then we'll run the media to see if that target actually works. So fundamental to our business is selling targeted audiences and finding those audiences wherever they happen to be watching TV. But we don't define that for the client. We could, and we probably increasingly will, but we don't do the strategy work to understand who their target audience is. That's what the segmentation should bring to the table as part of the work that they do with their agency to define the advertising that they're going to roll out.
David, let's talk a little bit about programmatic and how Simulmedia is working in the programmatic area.
So for Simulmedia, we define programmatic, especially in linear TV, in two camps. There's the monetization camp, which is what programmatic has been well known for in the digital world, which is making real-time decisions about the price and the placement of a particular piece of image, ad creative against an audience. In TV, that's not ready for prime time, to use an industry term. Because of the back end of the TV sellers themselves, the media owners don't have that capability to do that. They're getting there, and the operators are moving very quickly. The cable networks are moving sort of right behind them, but they don't really have that capability today to be able to place an ad based on real-time information. On the automated side of programmatic, which is sort of the first step in determining where advertising should be placed, we've been programmatic from day one. We look at the audience, we look at the data that I described, and we make a determination about what are the best placements for an advertiser, which could not be done manually. You have to use a system to do that, and you need to use data science to understand what the past is telling you about the future and what those audiences are most likely to be engaged in, and then be able to buy and measure that. So when we get to the end of automation is when we have a plan, and we go to our inventory partners and request inventory from them. That is systematic, although it's not programmatic because does not happen with pressing a button, unless you count the send button as a button. But it is from the we have a need for advertising to the where are we going to place it. That is all determined on a programmatic basis.